Do you wake up every day fired up to make a difference? Are you committed to taking your nonprofit to the next level and beyond? I have news for you. Success isn't about hard work or passion. It's about having a smart, scalable strategy in place. Hi, I'm Tom Kelly, your nonprofit catalyst. You may know me as the CEO of Charity Our Stay and Donor Books or the author of The $1 Million Nonprofit. What I help nonprofits achieve that give them a significant edge and a clear path to substantial growth is the ability to strategically fundraise and effectively engage their community. And that's what I'm going to share with you right here on the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. In each episode, I'm going to take you behind the scenes to reveal the strategies, techniques, and tactics of successful nonprofits so that you can put these into practice immediately to grow your organization. No matter if we are talking about common pitfalls nonprofits make and how to avoid them, exploring how to accelerate your next fundraising campaign, looking at how to attract ideal donors, or everything in between, this conversation is designed to drive your nonprofit forward. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Welcome back to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. Today, we are going to dig into the topic of donor engagement because let's be honest, it's not just about sending out an email and hoping someone donates. There's a recipe for success you can follow if your goal is to scale your nonprofit to $1 million. I could not think of a better person to have on the show today than Elton Taylor Jr., Director of Major and Planned Giving at New Orleans Museum of Art, spending 15 plus years building relationships and raising millions of dollars for a variety of causes from coast to coast. Elton, welcome to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast.
Thanks so much, Tom. I appreciate being on today.
So give me a little bit of history about how you got started. What was your origin story with getting involved in the nonprofit world?
It's very funny that you ask that question because the story about me falling into fundraising, as we all, as fundraisers, we have this story. No one goes into fundraising. You kind of stumble into it. And so I ended up getting my very first fundraising job in 2003-ish. And I was literally trying to keep from going into the military. So I left where I was living and returned home. And my dad was like, okay, you've got to do something. And so his thing was always, if you can't get a job, you're going to the military. And so I literally went through intake, had a ship out date for the Navy, and literally weeks before my ship out date, I got hired for my very first fundraising job. And I was so excited because I was like, I don't want to go to the Navy. And it's been up from there. It's been up from there, but I wouldn't trade it. It definitely leverages my background in communications. I love storytelling and the ability to be able to do that for worthwhile organizations making an impact in their respective areas of work is truly a part of life for me that is absolutely amazing.
So you just mentioned something there. You said the word storytelling. What is it, and how do you use storytelling to best, I guess, raise money, do your fundraising activities? Like, what part of storytelling, how does that come into play when you're going out and talking to potential donors or actually the donors that have been a donor for a long time?
Yes, storytelling is such a powerful tool. If you just go historically through the ages, various cultures and civilizations, people hear facts, people hear figures, but people always remember stories. You'll forget the facts, you'll forget the statistics and the numbers, and sometimes even the names of people who have been involved in certain things. But stories just have this way of really getting to you to where you can't forget that really great story that you heard, even if you can't quite tell it exactly the same way as you heard it, the story leaves an imprint. And that's such a huge part of the work that we do as nonprofit fundraisers is we have to be able to distill the facts and the figures, the hard items from the work that we do that can, in many instances, be boring, and take it, reframe it, repackage it in a way that is memorable, that captures people's attention, and also generates an emotional response. Because one thing that is very key in the work of nonprofit fundraising is that fundraising is it facilitates giving, and giving is an emotional decision, not a logical one. And so when we bog people down with a lot of information that does not facilitate an emotional response, and it doesn't mean you have to make people cry or anything like that, but people have to feel a tug, a connection with the impact, the vision, the mission. Something about your organization has to stick. And a story, particularly a powerful story, is a great way to create stickiness, as we like to call it in social media marketing, to where people will want to give, people will want to get involved, and people will want to spread your message.
Yeah, everybody that I've talked to after doing hundreds of these podcasts and talking to hundreds of different people in the nonprofit world, one of the common themes for the most successful organizations is the ability to make that connection with the use of stories. And it's great to hear you actually say the exact same thing, because what hopefully our listeners, after listening to several episodes and they hear that theme, like if they don't think that they need a good story to pull at the heartstrings or really just make that connection, like you said, you don't need to make them cry. You just got to give that connection of like, hey, this is where your money's going to go and who it's going to help. And this is how you can make an impact in these people's lives or in this area of the community. And, I think that's pure gold right there, what you just said. And I 100% agree with you on that.
Yes. Know your story. Always know your story. You can't go wrong with that.
Do you happen to have multiple stories that you kind of keep in your back pocket for whatever the situation kind of brings up, the best story that would fit that situation?
Over time, I generally develop my own stories that work. And I've had the opportunity to work in a wide variety of organizations. And so some organizations already have their stories, canned, developed, and prepared. You just master being able to deliver them in your own unique way. In some instances where you come into an organization that may not necessarily have, an archive or a collection of stories that they can pull from, it becomes incumbent upon you as the fundraiser to get the scoop. And so you have to talk to people, whether that be volunteers, whether that be people who are impacted by the mission, whether that be board members, founders, anyone who has some type of connection or interest to the organization. Get into a conversation with them. I guarantee you will find a story somewhere. And that's just one of those superpowers as fundraisers, is the ability to listen. You don't always have to talk, but you have to be able to engage in meaningful conversation that allows people to feel comfortable in sharing what makes sense to them, what connects them to the organization, and what will hopefully be instrumental in helping others connect to the organization as well.
Yeah, I think this would be a great point right now where we give everybody listening homework. Go talk to the people in your organization, pull out some stories from them, craft your own story, and get ready to tell that story to a potential donor and just see what happens.
Absolutely. The human connection is always, the golden key to being able to win friends, particularly when you're fundraising. Is if you can always see each interaction as a human interaction. You're not talking to a checkbook. You're not talking to, a machine or a device of some kind. You're talking to a person, and people react to different things. And once you have an understanding of what resonates with people, you will always be able to share information that instantly makes the connection.
Yeah. And I also think about it as like a salesman, when they're trying to sell you a product, if they're too needy and they're too pushy and they're too, you can sense that. And if you're a little bit more authentic with the ask and with your stories, kind of brings out that authentic version of you. And, hopefully, again, you're trying to build that relationship with this person. And if you don't think about them as like a checkbook or a bank account trying to help you fund your organization, it definitely will come across in a more authentic way that they can kind of build that rapport with you and make it a little bit easier for them to trust and donate to your cause, I think.
Absolutely, Tom. I don't often make the connection between being a fundraising professional and a salesman, just because they are, two pretty distinct areas. But one thing that I do love is this technique that I learned some years ago from a sales person called selling naked. And basically, it's the idea of going into a meeting with a prospect with no materials, no collateral, a pad and a pen at most. And you're there to have a conversation. You're there to listen. You're there to learn. And you're not there to sell anything, particularly in an initial meeting with someone. And I love that technique. And I used it recently in a meeting with a prospective donor. And it's amazing because you feel so much more engaged in the conversation when you're not thinking about, making sure that they get this brochure, or you mention this statistic, or you send them to this particular page on their website. Throw all of that out. You can follow up with all of those materials. But when you're there and you have FaceTime with a prospect or a representative at a company, make the most of it. Go in naked. Take a pad, pen at most, and converse genuinely. Take notes, listen, and then somewhere along the way, if you guide the conversation properly, you're going to see where the connection is.
Yeah, and it's almost I can put myself in the shoes of like the introverted nonprofit fundraiser that it doesn't really want to ask for money or go in and sit on those conversations. When you're walking in like that, when you're going in selling naked, you really have no agenda. Your agenda is really just to say, hey, let's have this conversation. Who do you like to donate money to? Where would you like to see your money support and be effective? And take the notes. And then I love what you said, where you could always follow up later with brochures and all of that. And I think for the introverted nonprofit fundraiser for an organization, that's a great way to think about it, to get them comfortable, going in and setting those meetings, because that's usually the hardest part. Not everybody, has the confidence to go out until they've done it several, maybe 100 times. And even then they might still be a little bit nervous.
Absolutely. It's like when I coached people who are searching for a job, I tell them, when you go into an interview, you don't have to sell yourself as far as your credentials and the fact that you are capable of doing the job. They wouldn't be talking to you if they didn't feel you couldn't do the job. So you've passed the competency part of this process. And I akin that to donor relationships. If someone is willing to accept a meeting with you, to engage in conversation about your organization and the work that you're doing, you've already made some type of impression on them to where you don't have to go in and improve anything. What you're trying to do is find the connection, be likable, be genuine. Let the prospect see your authenticity and the fact that you are really looking to build a mutually beneficial relationship with them. So yes, definitely, I can see all of that being in play.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What strategies have you found most effective for attracting new donors to the causes that you've worked with?
I love that question because the very first thing that comes to mind, Tom, is get out more. Like, get out of the office, get from behind your desk, get from behind the computer, get off of social media, and get in front of people. Like, literally, like, get your tuchus up and move. Get to where the conversations are happening. Get to where the people are who care about the work that you're doing. Get in front of those who are aligned with your vision, even if they're not supporting the type of work that you're doing. They may be supporting an organization whose work is tangential to what your organization is doing. And so both organizations may supplement each other's work because they're moving in the same direction and pursuing the same degree of impact. So get out, go where you can have conversations, productive conversations, meaningful conversations with people who are resourceful, not just, anyone who is willing to sit up and listen to you talk, but people who have an interest in what type of difference you're looking to make in the community. That's the best way to go about finding new donors and also getting introductions from others. Doubling back to what you mentioned a few moments ago about the introverted fundraiser, if you find yourself having trouble getting in front of new people or feeling awkward about introducing yourself, that's what your board is for. Have your board invite you to lunch with people that they know, people of influence, movers and shakers in the community, and let that board member introduce you to that prospect or to that resource. Because at the end of the day, if you're not out there telling that story, if you're not out there shaking hands, if you're not out there letting people know that the work that you're doing is valuable, they won't support it because they won't even be able to find you.
And that's 100% true. And the other thing is if you didn't get out there, maybe this person you're talking to right now might not be interested, but maybe they know someone that will be. And that it's a great referral to somebody that maybe might align with their values and their goals a little bit more than the original person you're talking to in that moment. And you would never know that unless you got out of the office and had those face-to-face communications.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got a compelling story to tell, seize every available opportunity to tell it. Because you don't know who knows who. Yeah. Someone who's willing to hear you out today may literally be the inroad to a valuable relationship tomorrow. So you definitely have to play the long game.
I love that. How do you communicate the passion and the mission of the organization to potential donors in a way that really resonates with them? Kind of that storytelling. Like, what is your method of kind of that communication style?
Yeah, my method always, because my background is in communications, my bachelor's is in communications, and I always lean into just simple comms theory when it comes to communicating with passion to people. I always remember that communicating is a two-way process. So it's not just all talking or all listening. It's an exchange. And so I always keep that in mind when I'm talking to potential donors, because the way I'm able to make a message resonate is to just feed off of each other's energy. Also, one thing, particularly for that introverted fundraiser who gets intimidated by a room full of people, one thing that I keep in mind, because I am introverted, despite how I sound, I am a bona fide introvert. To work the room, you've got to understand the room. So you don't have to know everyone in the room, but you have to understand the room. And once you have that understanding, you can effectively work the room. And that's important because you'll never be able to communicate in a way that resonates with a potential donor or a potential board member or a potential volunteer if you don't even know what resonates with them. So getting to know people, getting to understand the room, you'll find out what resonates with people. Listen to what they talk about. Um, give ear to just the subtleties of conversation that clue you in on what type of person you're talking about. And if you know your story, and if you have multiple vantage points to get your message across, you will find the connection. Again, giving is an emotional choice. It's not a logical one. So a message that resonates is critical, because if the message doesn't touch the heart, then people won't give. And then also, as a fundraiser, it's not your job to read somebody's mind. As I often say, I didn't major in telepathy. I majored in communications, but I didn't major in telepathy. So, we simply observe, we listen to, and we understand what donors express to us, and from there, as fundraisers, we simply play matchmaker. If there looks to be a match between the donor and the mission or the vision of the organization, then you basically set them up on a date to get better acquainted. And that can look a number of different ways, whether that's a volunteer engagement, inviting them to an open house event, inviting them to a fundraiser, or something to where they can get a glimpse of the work that you're doing, and how you're making an impact, because that also helps the message resonate with them as well, when they can see the mission in action. And then ultimately it just boils down to, what do you want? A gift? Or do you want a donor?
I love that, because you can also go into almost every situation with a potential donor with, hey, I just want maybe one of three things. Either become a volunteer, make a donation, or maybe you just follow us on social media. That could be like the lowest hanging fruit goal that you want to try to get out of a conversation with somebody, is at least some type of get them in your world somehow. And I love that, where you really don't have to ask for cash every time. You can ask for a lot of different scenarios, and just whatever your organization is set up to do to get somebody in your world. Just be prepared to ask for a follow on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, or, if they're willing to take the step further, become a volunteer or show up to the open house, or when they're ready, then, here's a payment link to make a cash donation to our organization.
Absolutely, Tom. It's literally having conversations with people and forming the call to action in such a way that it's answering the question of what's the next logical step for this prospect. And to your point, it could be a follow on social media. It could be a volunteer engagement opportunity. It may be a cash gift. You listen, you observe, you listen, you understand what the donor is trying to express. And then there you make the connection to what's the next logical step. And then you take it from there. And, particularly in my world now, where I'm strictly focused in major and planned giving, those are long engagements, to be able to, close a gift, so to speak. And you have to, again, play the long game. It's like, again, what do you want? Do you want a gift or do you want a donor? I'm going to always say I want the donor.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. When you're talking with a potential donor, are you taking notes about them, like any personal nuggets that they might drop, so that you can kind of bring them back up and kind of help build that relationship in the future? What is your process of kind of storing the information that they tell you, so that you can kind of use that to build a better relationship with them on your next visit with them?
Absolutely. You get inundated with so much information. It can be challenging sometimes to figure out, okay, should I be writing this down, or should I be taking note of this or not? In most cases, I try not to take a whole bunch of notes. And this is me dealing with me, because I know me. I spent a lot of work in the institutional giving side of things. So the grant writer in me is very detailed, very technical. I love the data. You can throw me in the data and I'm going to swim for days and enjoy it. But when you're more so on the individual giving side of things, you're really looking for those key nuggets, like you mentioned in the question. And so I strike a balance. I strike a balance between what I feel must go into the call note as something that will come up later. But then some things you just kind of remember, especially if it's something that you can tell the prospect is very passionate about, or it was something that evoked a specific emotion that really resonates with their life, their passion, what brings them joy. I always tell my colleagues here at the museum that giving is a joyful experience. And so when I'm talking to people, I'm always looking for the joy factor. And it's like, okay, what causes them to light up with joy? That's what I need to remember, because giving is an act of joy. And so when people bring the joy to a scenario, they're letting you know that, this is what makes me happy. This is what gives me the warm and fuzzies. This is what causes me to take action. This is where I see myself making a difference. And so yeah, I strike that balance, but I'm always looking for the joy factor. That's the key for me.
Yeah, I like that, because you when they're telling you why they're making that gift to you, and you can kind of see them light up, or hear it in their voice. That is definitely something that you want to maybe just highlight the next time you talk to them, or just bring up in some way, shape, or form, just to kind of reignite that joy, a feeling the first time that they handed over, a large contribution to them, or to the organization. But anything you can kind of circle back to that, I love that tip.
Absolutely. Anything, and it doesn't necessarily, and that's the thing as fundraisers, don't get so stuck on what relates to your work, your mission, your goal, what it is that you're trying to do. What is that donor trying to do? Are they trying to spend more time with their grandkids? Are they fixing up an antique car? Are they saving for their vacation home on some island out in the ocean? Whatever it is that brings them joy, take note of that. And make that a point of conversation. Always ask them about what brings them joy. Always be found guilty of that.
I love that. That's definitely a question everybody needs to add to their conversation, is what brings you joy, and just remember that, and then just keep bringing it up and highlighting it as much as possible. So now that we have a donor in our world, how do you approach re-engaging like past donors, maybe who have stopped contributing, and what techniques have you used that you've basically have been proven to be successful with bringing them back into the world?
Yes. Donor re-engagement is such an interesting aspect of our work as nonprofit fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. And I think oftentimes we overcomplicate it. Past donors are people. So there's no point in overcomplicating, whatever promotes re-engagement. Make it a point to tell them what you've been up to. Reach out to them, share how their past support has helped you get to where you are today, whether that last gift was, a year and a half ago, or a decade ago. Let them know what's changed. What are you working towards now as an organization, particularly for organizations that have shifted strategically? How can that donor help you build upon the successes they've previously supported you in achieving? These are simple conversational nuggets that can be had, whether that's via email, a phone call, meeting for coffee, or whatever. And I'll even go so far as to say this. Something that when I was a teenager, I would often hear the pastor of the church my family went to say is, tomorrow's letters never get written. if there's a particular donor, and this is, again, one of those homework moments, if there's a particular donor, a past donor whom you'd like to reconnect with, as a nonprofit fundraiser or an ED, write them today. Like, if you can see their face, if you hear their name as you're listening to this podcast, as soon as you are done listening to this podcast, write them a letter. Don't even give yourself the opportunity to talk yourself out of it. Make no excuses about it, because if that person's support really matters to you, no matter how long ago it was that they supported your work, you're going to prioritize writing that letter. So write them today. That's going to be my encouragement. Write them ASAP.
Would that be a handwritten letter or an email?
I would always lean towards handwritten email, a handwritten letter as opposed to email. And I say that because people rarely get handwritten notes anymore. And so with all of the influx of direct mail that people get, a handwritten note in an envelope that's been hand addressed is always going to stand out amidst the pile of printed typeface that comes into our mailboxes each and every day. So if you want a fast response, handwritten, absolutely.
And in that handwritten note, we're going to give them a little takeaway here, right? Like you said, homework to go and do after this. So let's just double click on that real quick. So we're going to do a handwritten note. And then the first part of the note, before we get to the call to action, right? We talked about call to actions earlier. But we don't want to make this too pushy, right? This first re-engagement is more like, hey, thank you so much. This is, I know we haven't communicated very much for a while, but your previous donation has really helped grow our organization. And here's where we're at today. And what else would you think to add to that? Or what advice else would you give for that first part of the handwritten note?
Like, share, if you have a short little, impact story that you can share, take that opportunity. Again, if you've got a compelling story to tell, seize every opportunity available to tell it. If you don't have an impact story to tell, what's a success or an achievement that you may have experienced within the last 12 to 18 months that would get this person's attention to say, hey, they really are, doing some great things over there. And then make your call to action. And the call to action does not have to be, we really would appreciate your support. Again, would you please consider giving us a gift? No, it can be as simple as, I would love to have coffee with you. When is an opportunity for me to, give you a phone call and share at length about this amazing project that we are working on, or this great success that we've been able to achieve? Always think about what's the next logical step. You don't have to skip. A lot of times people will say, I want to just get from point A to point G in one fell swoop. And you don't have to do that. Again, it's about the long game. If the next logical step is an invitation to coffee, make the invitation to coffee, and then make that coffee meeting worth coming to.
I love that, because you're not asking for a donation right there on the letter. You're asking like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can we, can I just give me 10 minutes and let me just tell you all the great things we've been able to do since you've been able to help us, and not sell them on, hey, can you make another contribution? We really need your help. But just say, hey, we just want to inform you. I want to buy you a coffee. I want to tell you all the great things that we've been able to do. And then you just drop the nugget in the seed and let them say, hey, I want to donate again, because this sounds amazing. Well, all the work that you've been able to do, and the people you've been able to help, and the community you've been able to serve. And I think that's the right way to approach it.
Absolutely. And always look for the joy factor. So if you make that invitation for coffee and you're sitting down and having coffee with them, find out what's been up with them. As you've shared this is a mutually beneficial relationship. If you care about what they care about, they will most likely care to some degree about what you care about.
I mean, I could talk about this for hours with you. This has been great. I mean, we're already like to time, and I got one last question for you.
Sure.
This is going to be another kind of a little homework advice for new nonprofits starting out today. So basically, as we wrap up, for all the new nonprofits that are tuning in today and just starting out, what advice or quick win would you recommend they take today to basically help them on their journey to becoming $1 million nonprofit?
It's two-pronged. So I'm having a hard time going back and forth in my head between two things, but I think they work together. Build your list. As a new nonprofit, fresh out of the gate, you have no donor base. Build your list. Every person who gives, every person who volunteers, every person who takes an interest in your work, every person who follows you on social media, provide them an opt-in link to be able to sign up for your newsletter, because you're going to require a list. You have to fill the stands. Basically, there's a quote that I love from Tom Ahern that I heard him say this in a keynote about 7 years ago. And he talked about the basically don't leave your donors in the stands. They're not your fans, they're your family. And so you're building your list, you're building your family as a nonprofit organization. And then the second part of that two-pronged strategy is, in addition to building your list, get comfortable communicating with them on a consistent basis. And to go back to what Tom Ahern talked about, with your family, you don't just come to your family with the good news. You come to them with all the news, even the bad news about fights you've lost. Your family cares and they want to know, and you have to get comfortable as a nonprofit being able to share information with them. So pull your people in close, make them feel like they matter, because they do. Their dollars contribute to underwriting the costs that are associated with moving your organization's mission. So that would be my two-pronged approach, especially for new nonprofit organizations. Build your list and get comfortable with communicating to your family on a consistent basis.
I love that quote, like, not your friends, they're your family. I think that's an amazing way to think about it, because just hearing it that way makes you think about them in a whole new light. And I also like what you said about share even the struggles and the failures. It's okay. They want to hear that, because then, they don't want to just all hear all the great things you're doing. Because then you might start to get them to be like, well, maybe they don't really need me as a donor.
Very true.
But if you can go in there and be like, hey, this is, we had a loss here, or, Katrina took out half of our garden and, we need to rebuild, or, another disaster happens. So you don't have to think that you need to always tell them about the rainbows when they need to be, sometimes kind of shown a little bit of the dark side of what goes into the struggles of running the nonprofit too.
Exactly. Your donors, your supporters, your family should not only hear from you when you have good news or when you want money.
Yep. Well, tell us a little bit about the New Orleans Museum of Art. How can people come visit you? How can they see the museum? How can we find you online?
Yes, the New Orleans Museum of Art is home for me. I've been here since December of 2023, so not too long, but an organization that's been in part of the New Orleans community for over 100 years, and we have amassed this beautiful collection of art with a lot of focus in African art, local art, Japanese art. And we have, of course, the Sidney and Walda Bestoff Sculpture Garden, which is celebrating 20 years this year. And we're so excited that this gem in the crown of the Crescent City is here, and you can learn more about the New Orleans Museum of Art at NOMA, NOMA.org. Information about hours and exhibits and programming as well. We have phenomenal programming here at the museum. One thing I love about our team here at NOMA is we do an amazing job of connecting the appreciation and the interpretation of art to life. And wellness and well-being. And so when you peruse our website, you will see a lot of programming that really connects just everyday people to art in a very inspiring way, but also in a very practical way because it connects to their everyday lived experience.
That is great. And if you're in the New Orleans area and you want to hear an amazing story from Elton, go ask for him when you visit the museum, and I'm sure you have a bunch of stories that you can kind of tell everybody and maybe become a donor, a volunteer, or maybe even join or follow your Facebook or your social media accounts, right?
Absolutely. We would love to welcome you to our family here at NOMA.
This has been great, Elton. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your wisdom. A lot of great nuggets, and there's been some homework that we discussed today that I hope all of our listeners will take and start doing this afternoon. But thank you again, Elton. This has been an amazing time together, and thank you so much for your insight.
You're most welcome, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, to share insights with the $1 Million Nonprofit audience. And whenever you want me back, I'm always happy to come.
Will do. Sounds great. Thanks, Elton. Thank you for listening to this episode of the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. You're here. That means you're ready to take your nonprofit to the next level and make a greater impact. Come visit realtomkelly.com/playbooks to download free playbooks that your nonprofit can use today to start scaling to $1 million in donations. Plus, so much more. Catch the new behind-the-scenes insights on the next episode, and until then, here's to the impact you will make. I'm Tom Kelly. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and encourage others to listen.